I've always been involved, engaged in the community. Yeah. From my youth, I was in Scouts, I was in the band, I was always doing stuff. In college, Eagle Scout. And you know, this is one of those things that comes full circle, because one of the things that that I've been privileged to do as a councilman is to serve at Eagle Courts of Honor for area scouts, and I just got to present a resolution, a proclamation from the town to 3 Eagle Scouts from 532 and to yet another one who I knew personally growing up here on the shore. Public service is a big aspect of what scouting is about. We think of the outdoors activity, the camping, hiking, outdoor cooking types of thing, but service to the community, service and service in general, service projects are a big part of advancement in scouting, and you must organize, lead a service project to become an Eagle Scout. So, yeah, that's been a part, you know, from my formative years. I live Ward 2 is sort of a section of the middle of the town. Not far north, not far south. It straddles Route 50. More of Ward 2 is actually east of 50. So Matthewstown Run and Galton and Mulberry Station, those are all part of Ward 2, as well as a section of South Easton around the Elks Lodge, Mecklenburg, the high school, and reaching up as far in one neighborhood as Brooklets. And that's where I live. Yeah. I think Easton has been, in the time that I've been on the council, which is 7 years now, I think that Easton has had some really great things going on in terms of reinvestment in the downtown. Look at the ownership of the Tidewater and the investment that has gone back into that business. There have been some really key downtown buildings that have been preserved. The Daylight Building right across from the courthouse, great reinvestment in that downtown property. The Eastern Shore Conservation Center. You know, here are people who went out on a limb. Before I came on council, there was some of this going on around the corner of Aurora and Dover, where our local architecture firm, Atelier 11, said, we're going to stick our necks out and make an investment in this neighborhood that really is kind of back on its heels. And they did, and then the Genovas built a second building right next door, and then you saw investment going across the street from them. And look at that neighborhood now. We've got a really great thing going on, especially with all the Hispanic groceries and restaurants, and there's great stuff going on there. Land use decisions, land planning decisions, the comprehensive plan and so forth was really what I think first interested me in taking a role in elected office in Easton. And so, yeah, I've immersed myself in that. The most recent annexation was, which got turned down, which is a little unusual that you see one of these turned down, was actually the category of annexation that I like to see, which is we were asked to annex a property that's ripe for redevelopment. It's already developed. There's industrial buildings, there's retail buildings on these sites, but they're really not useful for what they were originally built for. You know, manufacturing explosives, flares, and so forth. That has gone away. Sadly, the jobs along with it. And what's next? And so we should be growing inward like that on land. And when we're annexing on the edges of Easton, we should be filling in those pieces first and foremost that are already developed. I do take a special interest in the Talbot Boys monument as a historian, and over the years I've done a couple of historic walking tours of Easton for special groups and such, and the Talbot Boys is necessarily one of my stops. I think it's important, not so much about what it says about the county during the Civil War, but for what it says about the county in the early 20th century when the monument was erected. It really tells us much more about that period of time and the racial dynamic in that period of time, and we would be prouder of that heritage had we built joint monument, Union and Confederate. But that is in fact a part of our past. And if you look at where we are today, that nearly a century later we were able to erect a monument to our most famous native son, Frederick Douglass, on that same lawn. No, it's not a pairing. It is not. But it also is a product of its time, of our time. And I use these two as markers of looking at how Talbot County has changed over time. The comprehensive plan is sort of setting a town-wide concept for this is how we should be growing. This is where we should be making our investments. This is where we should be investing not only our funding but our time and effort. What should we be concentrating on? What can Easton is too small to be everything to everyone. What can we be good at, and where should we go? And the Port Street plan is really a small area plan to say, okay, in much greater detail than the comprehensive plan can possibly, how could this neighborhood that needs help, that needs reinvestment, how could it be redeveloped? How could we attract investment, and what kind of investment should we seek to attract? What sort of mixes of uses should this go to provide a roadmap, hopefully inspiration for some of these investors, maybe some opportunity for some grant funding if for the pieces that are public property, or at least public infrastructure that could make any of this happen. The town, the county, the government is not going to accomplish a goal like this. What we need to do as town government is to set a favorable climate and make sure the infrastructure is in place, and that we embrace development ideas that make sense, that are consonant with this plan once adopted, once fully developed and adopted, so that Port Street will be a thriving neighborhood. And one of the wonderful things one of the wonderful things about this plan is it's not merely looking at the end of Port Street, at the waterfront end. It's looking at the full length of Port Street going all the way up to Washington Street. And that's a segment that could stand some reinvestment too. It's had some investment, and we're seeing a little bit going on in there, along part of that stretch. We saw a proposal for the radio station property come in and then go away. They didn't get the financing that they needed to move ahead with that. For the next one of those big ideas that comes along, let's make sure that we've got the roadmap in place, and that's what this is about. Yeah. Now, I'll say one other thing about Easton Point, and that's the opportunity for the extension of the rail trail and for recreational development. The 11-acre former public works site, which is waterfront. It's not on Port Street. It's upstream on the North Fork of the Tread Avenue. It's actually at the end of Glenwood Avenue. But here we've got 11 acres of future parkland, a little bit of rare, publicly accessible waterfront. How can we give people in Easton access to that water, which has long been, like so many communities, historically Easton really has hardly embraced its waterfront, and had very little of it to embrace, frankly. Most Eastern Shore towns are built along the water, and Easton is really just kind of touches the water on one corner. And now here's our opportunity, because we have a different appreciation for the waterfront today. If you look at the history of that 11-acre property, it started out as the town dump. Yeah. This is waterfront. Yeah. And then it became public works. This is where we would put our backhoes and our road salt and all that stuff. Yeah. And now we've got an opportunity to make this publicly accessible and connect it up to the rest of Easton's park system by way of the rail trail, which will be connected across the North Fork of the Tread Avenue by a pedestrian bridge along the old railroad right-of-way. I can't wait. I think Easton's greatest opportunities in improving the quality of life for residents and visitors and people who work here have to do with park development. And we have these enormous opportunities with extending the rail trail, with the second leg of the rail trail that will go, instead of the north-south trail, that will go across town, that will link up to this future 11-acre park on the North Fork of the Tread Avenue, at the foot of Glenwood Avenue, that will bridge across to Easton Village. The RTC Park, we've got this tremendous acreage right in the center of town. Our parks are very heavily used. Idlewild Park, 17 acres of parkland, and boy is that parkland heavily used. We need more. We really need more. We
Are
don't.
we park poor?
You know, I think Easton is, at least in terms of existing developed acreage for parks, I think Easton is a trifle on the park poor side, and we have an opportunity to fix that. We already own the land, and it's just a question of appropriately developing it. The dog park proposal and so forth for the RTC park. Ultimately, we have to find. And one of the things we need to find is a better name for the RTC park. Good grief. That's the name of the Resolution Trust Corporation that took the title to a failed development, and put that on the agenda.
Yeah.
But we need to create better public access to that park. As we develop it, how are people going to get there? And it can't be all the existing parking on school board property. That's not much parking, and that's just not going to cut it. We need to do better.